select there. Okay, so I think we all consent to being streamed. That's it. Good luck to all the teams. And we want to introduce the Prime Minister. Here.
Hi guys. POIs in the chat.
Hello.
If
Hello. Please, my partner is trying to rejoin the call, so if you give him a few seconds for him to rejoin.
Okay, we can do that. So please let me know when they have rejoined so that we can begin then. Okay.
All right, definitely.
Hello, everybody. This is Andrews here. I just want to confirm if I'm audible. I'm the member of CG that dropped off. I just wanted to reconnect.
Yes, you are. We can hear you clearly. Okay, so I think we are all here now. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. POIs in the chat, please. If I haven't taken one, feel free to unmute yourself at the 5-minute mark. Otherwise, I'll start my speech in just a second. Panel, we agree that the fact of being born is arbitrary and probably none of us consented to the moral norms, societal standards that we currently live in. However, once you're in a single boat with all the other unfortunate souls on this planet, you do have the responsibility to escape needless harm and suffering that is felt and that is actively inflicted on other people. Nihilism is a privilege that the youth does not deserve, and therefore we stand incredibly proud on side of opening government today. So what is nihilism? What are the characteristics? You're far more likely to be a passive vegetable on opposition side of the house. You think that life doesn't necessarily matter because it leads to like the same outcome of everybody dying. You simply do not conform to any sort of like, you don't believe that like morality or religious beliefs are in any sort of sense like, or moral principles are in any sense relevant to how you should act and how you should interact with other people during your life. We're going to explain to you why it's incredibly important, like harmful in two separate arguments. First, in my speech, I'm going to focus on the broader scope of social issues and how that is incredibly exacerbated on their side of the house. And secondly, my second speaker, Ruth, is going to talk about how this actually inflicts damage on a much more personal level on their side of the house. So on the first argument about social problems being exacerbated, I think the premise of this debate is one in which like there are three preconditions. First, that like the biggest issues of the day that we're currently facing, like the climate change, like racism, xenophobia, like disenfranchisement of different groups, like it can't be solved because sometimes there are like massive collective action problems and simply apathy of individuals and lack of like self-initiative to take these issues on, etc. Secondly, usually youth is the most important actors of trying to resolve these issues because they are most likely to care in the modern world about these issues. But thirdly, there's also a lot of like urgency that we have to understand in this debate and why this is topical, because things like climate change has to be solved now rather than in the future. Before we move on, I'll take a clarification from opening up.
Yes, we want to understand what is your comparative or alternative in your world. What ideology do people believe that's standing in of itself, if not nihilism, young people?
Okay, the counterfactual is basically people adhering to some sort of morality and some sort of norms. I think that's a broader status quo that sort of has existed for centuries. I don't think it's like a very problematic to imagine the counterfactual, right? So why it's like easy, like we believe it's like easy to bend under pressure and under these problems, but why choosing nihilism and denying like moral responsibility and norms is incredibly problematic. I think there are three structural reasons in this debate and like three biggest impacts of this. First, whenever you're trying to tackle injustice, when you see police brutality on the streets, where you see an authoritarian regime actively clamping down on protesters and exerting violence, when you see like women being abused on the street, you as a nihilist and individual in this world are far more likely to be a passive bystander because you don't believe that you're a part of of that interaction. You simply distance yourself from any sort of problems because you simply defend yourself against the veil, against the shield, that you weren't the cause of that issue, that you weren't the cause of that problem. Therefore, you have no moral responsibility to act, right? This looks like you shrugging it off that poorer people in developing countries are suffering from famine. We think that this is an incredibly appalling ideology. It's inhumane. It's inherently privileged to those people who are who already have achieved means of subsistence, who are not actively facing these problems in the first place. I think this decreases empathy at the point at which it is very hard to rally support for social justice causes, right? And meaning that the youth is the most prominent actor in this debate about tackling these problems in the first place, by excluding or splitting off these people from the support groups that we could potentially polarize support from, is incredibly bad. Secondly, even if you passively support certain things, as you might on the best case scenario of opposition, there's still these things actively they require self-initiative at the point at which you actually have to mobilize your support in and of yourself, right? But also we think it's thirdly, even if we judge an ops best case, which is probably going to be about positive nihilism, which is oh, you at least take care of your own life, and even if you avoid certain common issues, we still think it is incredibly bad, because the counterfactual on their side of the house then is being more selfish, right? You're far less likely to be altruistic, to donate someone, or simply do good deeds that don't necessarily pay you something back, right? You're simply less empathetic. And even if it gives utility for your own life, it takes away, I think, a lot more utility from the lives of others who still do not subscribe to nihilism in the first place. So what do we believe are the impacts of this argument, right? I think there are three main impacts of the mechanisms that I've brought so far. First, these issues still exist. Even if opposition is able to prove that on an individual level, the nihilist feels somewhat better about themselves, this is not what the debate is necessarily about, because secondly, the third-party harms that individuals experience are incredibly bad. Before we move on, I'm going to take a closing opposition POI.
Well, you debate prior to this prevalence of nihilism, everybody was very humanitarian and cared a lot about people. That is simply untrue, isn't it?
This is a comparative debate. On your side of the house, when the nihilism is increasing, less people are going to support these causes. I'm not saying that everyone supports humanitarian action under in the last 10 years, right? But we're saying that on comparative, it's getting worse, and that's what this debate is about. Please be comparative. But secondly, you're far more likely to simply screw up relationships with other people even on a more personal basis. Think about family members, co-workers, or friends investing emotionally into you, helping you succeed in life, but at the point at which you basically shrug it off and say, oh, I don't want to run the capitalistic treadmill or whatever, I don't care about life in general, you also harm those other people who have cared for you in the past and have actively enabled you to have agency to make that decision to become a nihilist in the first place, right? We believe it's incredibly harmful, and it has the potential of destroying many different relationships you might have on your own. But thirdly, this has a disproportionate effect also on future generations of people. If the young people now do not mobilize to support social justice causes, you're far more likely to take away agency for future generations through issues like climate change, etc. So they're also a factor affected in this debate. To be a nihilist is a privilege, and the youth do not deserve this privilege. That is why we're incredibly proud to stand on OG.
We thank the Prime Minister and now invite the leader of the opposition to open up the debate from Op Bench. Here.
Hello, am I clearly audible?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I will begin my speech in 3, 2, One, what I want to analyze here in this debate is autonomy, why people create their own opinions and feel better about them, and why people still have meaning, still act based on that meaning, but simply have better views and better discussions when they support nihilism. For that, some framing and rebuttal. So nihilists aren't immoral people. They aren't sociopaths. They aren't all anarchists. What does nihilism mean? That it is people who believe that traditional beliefs and morals don't have inherent value or truths. They maintain that critical thought and heavy skepticism is how we should view the world. They say, yes, we do all die. That is what we objectively see. Nothing happens after. We have no reason to assume it does. In the large scope, we are all meaningless. What does that leave? It leaves people with the obligation of creating personal meaning and ensuring that the world around them is better. What is the government comparative? Giving inherent value to things or assuming they're inherently true. In other words, dogma. What are the likely alternative dogmas on government world? First of all, religion, the concept of believing in a higher power or in mysticism. That is, there is an absolute moral truth. The truth is mostly encompassed within books, several thousands of years old, and whatever is written in those books should be followed to the letter, and we should be as unskeptical about it as possible. Secondly, ideas of absolute morality. For example, appeals to nature and it's just not right. Or the idea that this is how we should do things. In America, for instance, communism is viewed as an absolute inherent evil because this is the land of the free. And thirdly, social idealisms, for instance, the American dream narrative, or the standard life process of study, work, start a family, die. These are the sorts of things that people push aside. Now, OG say that people in our world who push these things aside will simply stand by and choose inaction. The problem is that people stand by when they can justify it to themselves. That is, people want to act when they feel triggered emotionally by something, and they'll excuse it and avoid action only if they have a moral reason to. What are those two possible reasons? A, believing in external justice, such as the meek shall inherit the earth. I don't believe that I need to get involved because God or karma will ensure just rewards. Or B, that they believe that the injustice that is happening is actually fine. For instance, if gay people are prevented from having equal rights, that is fine because they believe it dogmatically. I might have a person who sees BLM protests and supports them emotionally, but then he goes, oh no, but wait, I believe dogmatically in the idea of land of the free, home of the brave, land of opportunity, which means that these people shouldn't protest, they should just try their best to succeed within the social structures, which enables it because they believe in those social idealisms. So this debate happens in the real world. In the real world, leftists and activist protesters, people who support critical theory, come from a place of nihilism. So let's start with the first point, autonomy and why I create my own opinions. Note, we want people to understand the world critically. We want people to be able to live in the world in the way that is best for them. And so we want them to understand the world as good as possible and be able to make the correct decisions for them. Parents teach us when we're young and impressionable a certain way of the world, and dogma is the most problematic of their lessons because dogma is what we cannot argue with. Dogma is what we must inherently accept. Young adults are people in the process of evaluating their life and their world. And embracing nihilism gives them the opportunity to build a new world of meaning and references and values, which they personally choose and sculpt for themselves, instead of it being handed in from outside as being said, this is an objective truth or objective morality. Nihilism has people examine where each thing individually comes from. Why? Because when we devalue things of external or inherent meaning, we replace it with internal or personal meaning. For instance, I put aside flawed or illogical assumptions, such as appeals to nature or God that hurt people around me because I no longer believe in the dogmatic justifications for them. But I do still give things that make me feel good value. That is, most people don't commit suicide or simply use drugs, but rather they adopt values such as empathy and to a degree hedonism. They think, how does each action and each decision and law in the world affect me and other people? Are we made happy by this? Or are we hurt by this? We accept that it is subjective. This is what matters to me. It does not matter absolutely. This is my opinion that I fight for. I am the one who gives it meaning. It in itself is meaningless. This allows people to, first of all, create more personal views. That is, they're able to fit their own mind and how they developed with the world and climate and time in which they live. So they can get rid of bad opinions that make them feel the cognitive dissonance within themselves. But secondly, even if this nihilism is temporary, that is, even if these people eventually settle back on a dogmatic truth that they begin believing, that is a truth that they had chosen for themselves instead of one that was given to them externally. Yes, POI closing.
Yes, so we think your characterization of nihilism is problematic because even the new meaning that people get are something nihilists don't even buy into. Nihilism isn't about people creating their own meaning. They believe what even exists doesn't have meaning.
No, I'm sorry. Claiming that nihilists think that nothing has any meaning is different from nihilists thinking that nothing has inherent meaning. That is, there is no true morality. We are all just here on earth to live and function and move around. Many of us are nihilists and we're still able to care about things. Good luck proving that nihilism is mutually exclusive with caring about things. So why do people still have meaning and still act based on that meaning? Humans are creatures of action. When they are inactive, they suffer. When they don't like something around them, they feel an urge to speak out and to change it. Humans can literally die from over-passivity and lack of movement. Nihilism does not exclude opinions, but merely means we view those opinions as personal opinions. What does that mean? That when people feel good at expressing their views, and people typically do, they will do that under nihilism, whatever those views are. So those youth still end up changing their society because they still feel empathy, the basic human reaction to sympathy, and can no longer excuse it with dogma. Because they view and secondly, because they view every bad thing in and of itself. That is, instead of living based on some abstract, instead of if my life is bad because my life is governed by some abstract value of people have a right to their money, I can become pro-socialist because I want my own life to be better. And we believe that justice can exclusively come in this world and should be shaped by our personal views of it. Lastly, we simply have better discussions with people. We have less inherent disagreements due to dogma, which make it impossible to convince people to support gay rights, people who are never able to adjust to society, or people who view the very discussion as illegitimate because they don't value discourse because they believe in these dogmatic truths. Because nihilism leads to better opinions, proud to oppose.
We thank the leader of the opposition and now invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case for OG. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just take a couple of seconds. Okay. Right, I'll begin my speech in a few seconds. I would like my POIs to be in the chat, please, if possible. Preferred pronouns are she, her again. And I'm beginning in 3, 2, 1. Look, panel, it's a privilege for individuals, young individuals especially, to be nihilist, to put Bojack on an altar and to sit on a sofa, literally watching the world burn around you. No one knows how hard life can be better than burnt out university students, but this is not the justification to actually refuse to incite active change, to engage with life and all of the opportunities that it gives to you to the very fullest. Because nihilism is the worst thing to happen to our generation. We're incredibly proud to stand on opening government. In my speech, a few points of refutation with integrated rebuilding, even though opposition hasn't been incredibly comparative with us so far, and like our third argument, which focuses on the inherent nature of youth, like poisoned by nihilism and the like scaled individual impacts on how like the quality of life of an individual inherently decreases, right? But firstly, let us talk about the what has opposition brought to us so far. Firstly, the counterfactual that they gave through the POI and overall within the leader of opposition's first speech. Look, the counterfactual is that you actually think that whatever you do has at first a long-lasting impact to surroundings, to people other than you, and secondly, that everything actually that you do actually matters and is supposed to be done. There's purpose in your actions, thus you're far more likely to be thinking about every single thing that you do, and you're far more likely to actually be engaging with your surroundings because you understand that it is like ultimately something that should be considered. At this point, you're far more likely to participate on social justice movements, not on the basis of selfishness, but on the basis of altruism, which is like a counterfactual to what nihilism in and of itself is. At this point, you're far more likely to be empathic towards your surroundings, towards the people around you, because you don't just want to like make them uncomfortable on the street because it's fun, nothing matters, right? So if I'm a nihilist, I might as well just make people uncomfortable because it makes me feel nice, right? And moreover, you're far more likely to be happy just because you're willing to put yourself at risk of experiencing negative emotions, which overall like increases the amplitude of your life and overall of all of the emotions that you're capable of feeling. Overall, our burden then in this debate is to prove to you that the current like increasing trend of youth opting into nihilism has done more harm than good. It is not to prove that the world will fundamentally change and capitalism will cease to exist just because nihilism does not exist, but it is to prove that if the current trends actually are to continue, our world is going to completely fall apart, which is what we're completely like incredibly happy to do, right? What we're telling you is that at the point at which young people are actively recruited into nihilism, when they say that, oh, you know, that drunken scientist grandpa from Rick and Morty is actually kind of cool. I would like to be like him when I grow old. Comparatively, you're far worse off because more people buy into this sort of narrative. But then secondly, let's just talk about the framing that opposition has brought up in this debate so far. They say that nihilism is not individuals being inherently immoral. It's just them thinking that like social norms are inherently bad and that there's nothing universal. Look, we would argue that the very main point of nihilism, the very tipping point that makes it different from all of the other like narratives and ideologies that you might be facing, is that you do not have any ambition. You realize that nothing matters, which inherently pushes you, even if not explicitly, at least implicitly, to not take control of your life, to basically just not be as engaging with your surroundings because you know that it has no purpose. It is you being less likely to overall think about morality, think about your surroundings, about the future of the world, because you think that there's no need to actually like ultimately do that. Opposition has been incredibly unengaging with this sort of characteristic and counterfactual that we brought into you, and they're trying to like basically reframe nihilism into something where you're just like, oh, happy and existential. That's not what it is. Nihilism inherently has a negative connotation with like having no ambition within it, right? The alternatives that they have brought us, we think that they have been kind of unengaging, like in comparative with us anyways, and I will shortly like consider why the alternatives that they have given us are not like actually very relevant and are not realistic. But like, first of all, let's just say that because like in the past, nihilism hasn't existed, our world hasn't collapsed. So it's incredibly stupid of them to bring up this sort of framing where they say that at the point at which nihilism ceases to exist, all of the people are like following some very strict dogmas, which make us all vegetables on sofas, right? But then firstly, they say that religion could be a plausible alternative. We think that this is very unlikely because the young people are the main agent in this debate, and young people are more and more secular and far less likely to buy into like especially conservative Catholic dogmas and whatnot, right? So the young people are actually like more willing to challenge any sort of authority, especially that of religious institutions. Secondly, they give us a sort of weird alternative of the nature and like letting things go their own course. We think that nihilism actually usually goes with hand in hand with other sort of narratives such as like anarchism and wreaking havoc and going against any sort of like authority and whatnot, right? But then thirdly, they give us this idea of social idealism, and we don't think that this is exclusive to their side of the house, and this is actually symmetric to us because we do also have like different ideas of how do we actually achieve social change, and there's no like uniform standard of the American dream that all young people follow. Lastly, regarding the argumentation about how people are going to be following these dogmas and they're not going to be considering anything, and how nihilism actually pushes you to examine your own beliefs, we think that this is highly unlikely to happen because like you literally say that there's no point in thinking about shit. You say that there's no more like universal moral principle to abide by, so you're not even going to act on it. You're not going to be thinking, okay, I'm in this situation now, what can I do about it? You literally don't care about it, right? Even if you believe like the alternative of religion, we're happy to take upon this burden because then at least you like ultimately do not challenge the idea that you should be in solidarity with other people. You should be considering whatever they're feeling and their beliefs. So we think that this is alternatively like overall better. Before moving on to the third argument, I'll take a POI from closing. Opening.
Please be comparative. Those youths who today aren't nihilists tend to be conservatively dogmatic like their parents. Conservatively dogmatic is not inclusive of wide society, but simply of those who share in the same dogma.
look, what we're telling you is that at the point at which you're not challenged to actually question your own beliefs and to make mistakes and to participate, not for the sake of yourself, but for the sake of others, you're far, far, far less likely to actually like clash with other individuals. We're telling that at the point at which you're like, you think that nobody can be inherently right or wrong, you're more likely to clash with other individuals, be more radical towards them, and overall not engage with them. Right, let us then move on to this idea of the inherent nature of youth being poisoned by nihilism. We think that the purpose of youth is essentially to learn and to risk and to move out of your own comfort zone. Like, for example, move out of your hometown to uni because you expect to improve academically, or getting into a relationship because you expect to feel happy because of that. Because nihilism inherently opposes any sort of ambition and expectations from life. Individuals are far less likely to make life-changing moves toward like doing something that might actually bring them happiness. At this point, the best case scenario of side opposition is that they're far less likely to risk and have experienced very plain emotions, but the worst case scenario is that they have everything, like meet everything with negative emotions, they fetishize mental illnesses, and are overall not willing to risk anything in order to grow as individuals, and they do not know what ultimately makes them happier. Because of that, you vote opening government.
Thank you very much to the Deputy Prime Minister. And now we invite the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to sum up the first half of this debate. Here.
Hello, am I clearly visible and audible with that?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. So I am going to begin in, before I begin, POIs please in the chat. I probably take around the end of my speech, probably from closing. Okay, so I'm beginning in 3, 2, 1. A point of framing. They tell us that the counterfactual is you believing everything you do is important and with long-term involvement. They cannot invent a counterfactual. This is a debate about the real world. They have the burden to prove why this is likely to be the counterfactual. This is extremely difficult burden because in the existing situation in the history, the situation was believing dogmatically in stuff that put the burden on the person itself, like Eyal analyzed you, the American dream, which means my responsibility to my life is on me, and if I don't succeed, it's only my fault. God and religion, stuff like nationalism. Intuitively, it's really likely that what used to be historically ruling will be able to continue to exist. In addition, it's ideologies that are extremely attractive. It is really unclear what attracts people on their side of the house to altruism and good stuff. I think historically, it's just really uncooperative and unlikely. Okay, now I'm going to address the point of people will be extremely selfish and not do good things. I'm going to explain why it's caused more doing good things than political, why the nihilism was the catalysator that leads to supporting good issues. Because Eyal explains to you, it allows people to decide what's important to them in their life. Because if there is no meaning a priori, if money is not a value in and of itself, God is not a value in and of itself, reaching high position of power is not a value in and of itself, then why do I do what do I do? OG just tells you people will be depressed. They'll just think about everyday life. But I think that young people are in a unique position when they are released from the burdens, from the shackles of the dogma that was forced upon them, and the nihilism tells them there is no a priori meaning. You decide what you are going to live your life for. They are extremely likely to choose good things to go through and help their society. Why is it likely? Firstly, these are young people. They have a lot of time and resources to create positive discourse. They just have the time to think at the beginning of their life. Secondly, young people are in an environment which encourages discourse. Empathy, something that's very prevalent in the media, in the books, in the magazines, stuff like that. Then where the nihilism rises in universities, in political circles, where they have an active discussion about why do I live? Why do I do the things I do? We think that their analysis about people being selfish is really uncomparative, because the things that cause empathy is not believing in dogma, not believing in, in a God or stuff like that. It became for being able to sense pain and understanding that other people are just like me, and just like I can sense pain, they can sense pain, and this is why I care about other people, and this the basic reason for empathy does not change. So we think that when third mechanism, when there is no a priori meaning, what I think is likely to rise are stuff that are utilitarian values, and now something affects me and both society becomes the thing that gives me meaning. It is really unlikely I'm just going to think only about myself, because because I also think about my friend. I also think about my country, my city. Everything is also connected to myself. I care about climate change, not because nature is a value in and of itself, because if the temperatures rise, my life will be worse, and people that I can empathize with, because there are people just like me and they bleed just like me, will have worse life also. So you think values that like authentism, which go very extremely well with altruism, go more on our side of the house. Note this is also helps the minorities. Why? Because I analyzed you how other ideologies are in contention with them. Religion, American dream, how the American dream is direct contention with stuff like Black Lives Matter that says no, the society put shackles on me and now you have to give us separation. When you don't take your meaning for belonging to a certain group of people, you give them alternative to religious ideologies. You encourage critical thinking because nothing is value of itself. You have to prove every value. You think it takes away the distance between people, because we agree on a way to create discourse. We agree on a way that we need to sit and talk about these issues, and what is important is what affects the lives of people. This is like a complete flipping of OG. Before I explain how it affects me psychology, please give us our extension, CG.
Yes, so your ultimate goal is to achieve discourse, but you don't need nihilism to be able to achieve this, because liberalism, for instance, allows you to have discourse. Like, you don't need nihilism to achieve all the things you want on your side.
Thank you. Firstly, I think nihilism and liberalism go hand in hand, and the reason that liberalism was able to rise, is because of nihilism, which allowed people to choose for their own mind. Secondly, I think liberalism is not like always good. You need to question everything. I think we need to question everything and talk about what very specific. Liberalism also becomes better, and also it allowed the liberalism. Secondly, how it affects me psychologically, because I want to do an even if point. Even if I become more self-centered, even if I am just around my world, I think this is a better way for me to live. Personally, this is a huge impact, because government explain to you on really hard issues, yes, like third world hunger, climate change, stuff that are really horrible. Firstly, they did not analyze at all why it's likely to change, because all of the problems that they analyze existing, like collective action problem, like not being able to think of them, still exists symmetrically on both sides of the house. But what does change? I think that when people try to do stuff dogmatically and feel like stuff is very like the American dream or religion or nationalism, they always feel under pressure. They always feel like I'm not good enough. We think most issues are issues people cannot change on their own. Yes, most people, privately, cannot change climate crisis, cannot change helping third world, cannot change all of those stuff. But we think that the ideology, the dogma that tells people everything is your responsibility, you have to do all the time, everything for others, cause people a lot of pressure and goes in contention with putting the burden on the right people. We think that governments have the responsibility to solve those problems, and people are still going to likely to vote in order to solve those problems. But I think that all of the ideology that put the pressure on external things, which I cannot control, always feel I'm not good enough. Under the best case of OG's world, I am still not solving climate crisis. I am still not causing further harm. But under their side, I am so empathic. I always think about it. I always feel really bad. What are the impacts of that on my life? Firstly, I feel always not good enough. I feel I'm always constant and measured up against the dogma. Whatever dogma is, it is because it is something I have to achieve, and this is the value of my life. And then I am always feel not good enough and measured. Secondly, I am never able to enact the change. The change I can do is never completely the dogma. You can never live the complete American dream. You can never altruistically help people the most. You can never be all of they want to achieve. And even if I do make slight change, it is never enough. But when I say, okay, I decide the meaning of life, I choose how I want to live, then you are able to live with less cognitive dissonance and be able to feel so much better with yourself, because you decide what meaning and then you live your life. I think people are not going to solve most of the problems in society, but they are still going to try and work, but they're going to give it less weight in their own personal habits and feel less stress. What do I prove to you in this debate? Firstly, autonomy, which is very in and of itself and cause people to feel so much better in their life, very itself. Secondly, why the alternative is likely to be worse, and why being realistic is not in contention with doing good things. Thirdly, improving my life, taking away the shackles and the horrible feeling that comes to me every minute of my life when I believe in something external and I can never achieve it fully to extent, and I always feel not good enough. All of that, vote wow.
Thank you very much to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition and indeed all the speakers in the first half of this debate. And now we move on to the second half. So we first invite the member for the government. Here.
Just give me a sec. All right. Just to confirm, I hope I'm audible clearly for everybody.
Yes, you are.
All right. Just setting up my timer and then I'll begin my speech. Okay, great. Okay. I'll take POIs in the chat space, and so kindly drop your POIs there. I'm going to begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Let's be clear in this debate. Nihilists are people that say that values are baseless. They are people that have extreme expression and radical skepticism that condemns the intrinsic nature of existence. They say that there is no hope for a better future, and so existence in itself is meaningless. They believe in nothing, no loyalties, and no purposes in life, right? These nihilists are not equal to liberals that OO wants to argue, because liberals and their mere ideas value life and want to make life more valuable. They want to secure a much more happy world for people to exist in. And that's how you cannot lump two ideas that fundamentally oppose each other as one. So if you want to really defend nihilism, you cannot be the side that's defending liberalism. But they keep on mentioning counterfactual. The counterfactual on our side can be summarized in 2 lines. Existentialism as a value that exists generally, and generally people valuing life and striving to make life better and making the world better in general. There are 2 broad extensions that I'm going to argue. First of all, what sets the human species apart from other species, and why the basis on which nihilism is built will be the very basis on which the entire human civilization is destroyed. There are 2 things involved. A, the ability of humans to feel and be sentient and be empathetic towards other humans. And this emanates from the idea that we value life, and so we want everybody to experience quality lives. But B, our ability to collaborate in larger quantities and for far longer periods than other species and other animals. So for example, a group of humans together who have decided to rally around an idea can collaborate for a longer period and in larger quantities than a group of lions. And that's because we are able to believe in value systems and rally around those values. There are 3 things then you need to note. 1, this is the reason why we have from these things, we have the ability as humans to be sold stories of hope, and we buy into them to influence our actions. Secondly, because we have defined morals, values that charge us to inherently seek better societies and care about the human society. This is the reason why the story of democracy is one that rallies lots of people, because it has a central value of valuing life and eliminating oppressive institutions that deny others quality life. The premise on which we coagulate on ideas that seek to improve human existence is the very premise on which nihilism opposes. With nihilism, none of this is possible. This leads to 2 broad impacts. 1, this is the offshoot of systems and institutions that have become the largest aggregation of economic resources. Example, people agreeing to come together to be taxed and contribute their resources to a larger body. Contributions from international organizations and big states. These are the funds that make it possible for the world to invest in technology and improvement in human civilization, given that these endeavors are very capital intensive, and without fundamental collaborations that aggregate wealth on very large scales to embark on these developments, we cannot engage in them. And these developments are very valuable and very key because they drastically improve the quality of life and increase happiness and comfortability. For example, things as simple as gaming technologies, air conditioners, mobile phones, social media have drastically increased happiness, made life more comfortable and better for people. These large-scale capital generations are the ones that give us the ability to pursue research seek and develop vaccines when global pandemics hit, because they're extremely capital intensive, and the fact that we have pre-existing technology as a result of these mobilizations make it easier. The second thing then is to say that the existence of morals, beliefs, and fundamental values in life is also the premise on which we mobilize all of humanity to solve looming global crises in effective ways that are made possible. So for example, climate change, racism, poverty, and economic inequality, patriarchy are all things that we are able to mobilize people around because there is a central value that is appreciated in life. All these are because we want people to live comfortable, quality, and valuable lives. But this is only because we value life in itself in the first place. Nihilism fundamentally opposes any value in life, hence this would not exist on upside. On our side, aside the economic mobilization, we are able to convince individuals to believe in these values, undergo behavioral changes to meet these values of tolerance, a clean climate, charitable society, etc., and improve the overall form and improve the overall form of life from the micro levels of society. This means individuals will be worse off on upsides in terms of pandemics that would hit harder on smaller countries because everybody is a nihilist and we don't want to coagulate along values. But secondly, the nihilists themselves will still experience bodily harm and all the climate change harms that come on their side with the lack of coagulation. We oppose anything that is self-destructive to humanity, and that's the premise on which we establish our opposition. Opening opposition.
Yes, prevalence of nihilism means that most young people today are nihilists. You cannot claim this looks like most of them being psycho and not caring about life, nor can you assert the counterfactual as an objectively good and universally shared regard for life.
So it's a comparative. I don't think my counterfactual is perfect. I've just shown you that it has inherent benefits to human existence that you cannot deny. But why is the increasing prevalence amongst the youth a terrible thing, which is my second extension? Because prevalence connotes a trend. It has become fashionable and more youth are incentivized to join because their friends are trending and saying that's the way to go and they want to feel a part of it. It would become the dominant ideology in the future. The youth, which is very crucial here, are the people that will control political institutions in the future and decide what resources should be used for. Impact of this means that A, the future political institutions may not even exist because there are no values to coagulate around. So all the benefits I gave you from the first extension will not happen because there are no political coagulations around values, etc. Because inherent in nihilism is a deconstructed society. But secondly, even if they exist, they don't value life and hence don't allocate resources to make life better for other members and minorities within society. Even when you don't care ideologically, which is what exists on upside, the damaging effects of the climate change will still happen and racism still happen and all people will experience. Note that there are still a group of people who may not be nihilists in this future. Those are the people who want to value life but will be given a terrible life by the majority that do not value it. This is a fundamental abrogation to human civilization. We ought to oppose it. Proud to propose, sorry.
Thank you very much to the member for the government. And now we invite the member for the opposition to open up the case from CO. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yep.
Good. Right. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. I personally think nihilism is true, honestly. Like, there is no specific point in life, is there? Like, nothing is going to happen when you die, and you probably won't be a king of the world, right? The difference is, when nihilism is present, you don't even expect giant things and are much more able to enjoy life on our side of the house. No, opening opposition is a philosophical theme, and we get at the end of the day that you'll have like better discussion and critical thinking. We're going to prove real positive impacts it has on people's life. I think we should win on that comparative. Prior to that, just a few points on opening government in terms of rebuttal, and then I'll be going on to a case. When they say about like you'll be passive and everything else, number one, this is not true because you still find joy in life and you still see like a point in being an okay human being, right? Even if it's not like futuristic. But secondly, notice this never happened even prior to nihilism, right? People were always like shitty one to another. There was this collective action problem. There's like fear for oneself, etc., etc. That's the right reason why people are not necessarily helpful and humanitarian and everything else. But even if you're more active in those terms prior to this, right? Notice that these were other narratives in place, such as patriarchy, patriotism, like heroism and things like this, I think that is a completely different debate. On their own POI, they say, but it's comparative. Notice there is no comparative. So how does this nihilism work and look like? Notice two things. Number one, it tells you that you shouldn't expect anything big from life. That doesn't mean go kill yourself, right? It literally means that life doesn't have that high purpose in which all of us can have some incredibly important role and that everything is going to be fine and that we'll all be happy at one day, right? Secondly, it tells you it's fine to just like live life and enjoy every single day, right? Without expecting a divine reward at some major conclusion of life, or that there's an answer to every question and that everything at the end will make sense. Why? Like that was framing, right? Two things that are going to come from this. Number one, why this is important for young people. Number two, who follows this nihilism in this definition and why that is important. Let's talk about number one. I think all of us like become nihilists at one point. Notice when you turn 40, right? You've been through shit. You've been through heartbreaks. You've been through loss. You've been through failures, right? But the problem is that you see, like at one point in life, you stop seeing deeper meaning. You understand that everything is pretty much linear and there's probably not going to happen anything specifically important in your life. But the problem is when you are 40, that kind of information comes too late in your life, right? Why is this true? Because number one, you've already wasted time, right? You've already like invested time in wrong people, wrong things, wrong events, wrongdoings, and everything else. You've put a lot of emotion, a lot of money, a lot of stress in things that turned out to like didn't pay off and were shitty at the end of the day, right? Notice that when this realization comes, it's much more heartbreaking at that point, right? We say when nihilism like exists when you are already young and realize nothing big, like there's not going to be anything big coming from life, probably for like most individuals, that's a moment from which you can actually come back. And that is the comparative in this debate. That means that you can use your youth to have, say, a good time, or don't invest time and money in things that won't pay off. Don't like be friends with wrong people and everything else. If nothing, we say that at least you expect these things to happen. You expect life to be sort of shitty and without specific answers to most questions you have, right? Which means that on a comparative, you at least don't get fully heartbreak when you're 50 and you can't do anything about it. We say people live happier lives on our side of the house. But furthermore, the counterfactual is the following, right? On their side, the narrative is, right, there is something big coming up. You have like, there is a reward for all of us. All of us have meaning in this life, and there is something so important, and all of us have some certain role, right? Which means that necessarily, in order for that counterfactual to work, you're going to need to teach people to work all day, right? Invest in your future. Don't waste your time. Like, be responsible human being and everything else. We think that these are wrong things because they don't necessarily pay off for most individuals, right? Notice that on our side of the house, people are much freer, right? Insofar as you feel bad at first, right? You put more time into things that actually make you happy now instead of investing in future that probably won't even pay off at the end of the day. We say the counter narrative is terrible. This narrative feels it. Why is this so? Because number one, you realize that there is no specific point in using your whole youth on probably nothing, right? Secondly, you realize like most of the things that you have invested in like won't necessarily pay off, right? Thirdly, you see that otherwise you'll waste a shit ton of money and energy and time and stress in wrong things and wrong people and everything else. We say when there is a narrative that tells you nothing is like, there is no particular answer or particular point of all of this, we think that people are freer on our side of the house when they're actually able to use all of these things, right? We say that is important. But secondly, who follows this nihilism narrative the most? Notice that these are the people who like don't have a lot of chance to actually achieve the big things that society imposes onto us, right? Those are poor people. Those are disenfranchised groups. Those are all of those marginalized people who can't necessarily reach the top which the society tells you have to reach, right? Why is this so, right? Because like they won't necessarily be able, given where they come from and who they are and everything else, to reach all of those terribly big things that society imposes. So what they need is a narrative that tells them it's fine. You don't necessarily have to find the answer to every question. There doesn't necessarily have to be an answer. There doesn't necessarily have to be a meaning to all of these things that are happening and everything else. We say this helps them massively. How? Number one, it tells you it's fine like to just like enjoy life and not expect anything big coming from it. Secondly, it tells you that it's not necessarily your fault that you didn't achieve all of those things. things? That is the important question, because everybody else feels like if they hadn't achieved what society tells them they should achieve, then they start believing that's their own fault, right? So thirdly, it gives you like closure that it's fine to just enjoy life as it is, right? It means that it helps you just to realize that life is necessarily meaningless and you should just enjoy it and maybe not like blame yourself for all the bad things that happen. We say we help those disenfranchised groups that otherwise can't reach closure if the narrative is you have to achieve something big and life has like all of these beautiful things and you have a role, and it turns out that they don't have a role. Furthermore, let's take the best case scenario. Let's say you're happy and successful. Why is this still good? Notice, number one, you don't get satisfied with anything because you always want more. Why? Because counterfactual is expecting large things, life having meaning, great rewards coming your way and everything else. So even if you have some sort of things, you're never happy because you always expect more, always want more, right? Always try to find the answer. When is life actually going to reward me for all the work that I put through? When on a comparative you have nihilism, which tells you probably the reward is never coming and this doesn't have any specific meaning, you feel much better generally and generally enjoy smaller things than outside the house. But notice that like you can't necessarily be happy at all times, even if you're the most successful person in the world, right? Because and then when the counterfactual tells you, well, there is still something bigger along the way, you feel unhappy because you like didn't necessarily reach it. On a comparative, nihilism tells you it's fine not to expect too much. It's fine just to enjoy every day without expecting huge rewards or answers to every question. It's closure for people who can't have closure otherwise. Because of all of these reasons, oppose. Thanks.
We thank the member for the opposition, and now we invite the government whip. Before that, a reminder to all of the speakers remaining to accept and ask POIs. Thank you.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Hello, so I'm taking POIs in the chat space, and please give me a few seconds to set up my timer. All right, I'm starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, this is why you should prioritize closing government case above opening government case, because opening government says that in their world we solve social problems, right? So social injustice and all those things, and in their argument about how it harms future generations, they say that we take away the agency, right? From closing government, we give you a much bigger impact, which is that civilization as we know it, the reason why we enjoy the very structures of civilization, such as governmental systems, such as our economic structures, such as the ability for us to coagulate and survive as a race or as a species, is as a result of the inherent belief in the value of life, the inherent belief in the meaning of life. What that means is that in a world in which we do not oppose the idea of nihilism, we create a world in which we unravel the very basis upon which our civilization is built. Notice that that is a much worthier like impact to have, right? It means that in our world, we give you the mechanization about how like all these things happen, right? We mechanize how you are more likely to derail society as a whole, because in a world in which the youth now believes that this is a prevalent idea, they use that as a means of socializing the next generation. When they socialize the next generation, it means that this becomes the dominant ideological leaning. It means that the political structures, the economic structures, and the social structures are going to be in the hands of people who believe that life inherently does not have meaning. And we think this is extremely disastrous to the civilization and the sustainability of the human race. Panel, for this, closing government wins this debate. Now, let me engage up and show you why we win above up. So let's start from closing opposition. First off, we think the characterization of what nihilism is something that UP does not understand, and they want to eat their cake and have it. Why do we think this is so? Because UP wants to say that they have a certain benefit on their side, right? So let's start from closing opposition. Closing opposition's first argument is that they don't expect anything big from life. That is, people shouldn't expect anything big from life, right? But then they should still find some sort of meaning in life. The reason why that is a bad frame is that nihilists don't believe in any form of meaning in life, right? And the reason why it is important is because a nihilist is not now going to find a new meaning in life, because such a person believes that life inherently does not have meaning. So the kind of positive benefits that they talk about on their side does not exist. But then secondly, we prefer a narrative which, even if it's not true, that's the thing, we are engaging the best case scenario from closing opposition. Let's assume that the hopeful things we tell people are not true. We think it's better. Why? Because we prefer a narrative that gives people joy, even if it's not true, as compared to a narrative that does not give people joy. Because what their narrative says is that life inherently does not have meaning. It means that their life, the impact of their world is that life is empty, because human beings become redundant, because human beings cannot act in any way to improve their lives. And that is why, even if our world is worse, like it's not true, we prefer it. So we prefer to tell people that when you die, there's heaven, right? There's heaven for you. We think that gives people joy within the short term and for a long term. So on who gives people more joy, it is closing government that gives you more joy. But then number two, we think it is not true that our world is just narratives. We think our world actively leads to action. Why do we know this to be true? Because perception informs action. If you tell people that if you engage within a democracy, you can make your lives better, they are more likely going to invest more energy into making their lives better, and this translates into them making their lives better. So for instance, even though I come from a West African country called Ghana, I am having a debate with people outside my region, right? Because I aspired and I believed that I could become one of the greatest debaters to have ever lived. This aspiration is becoming a reality because I was hopeful. It means that our world actually has positive impact and trickle down impact, right? But then the next thing, right? We think in their world they can't enjoy life. Why? Because people believe that things like academic achievement, things like career paths, things like relationships are inherently meaningless. And it means that in your world, it's literally an empty world. And that is why you simply cannot vote for closing opposition or bench above government. The comparative is that our world gives you hope that makes your life better. Now, opening opposition, a very ridiculous thing. And this is why. Because first off, they confuse liberalism, right, with liberalism with dogma. And this is the clarification for that, right? People can be liberal and still question systems, but still believe in dogma. The assumption for their side is that you need to be a nihilist before you can question society, which is not true, because people are liberal and they still have conversations that change society and change our values. It means that society is not necessarily ruled by dogma. Dogma affects society in some ways, but society is ruled on values, and those values are questioned every day. So how do we mechanize this, right? So for instance, the value about how women should be treated in society, in conservative societies, there were discussions on these things as society evolved to an extent where we were able to now accept women to have an equal place in society, right? It means that you don't necessarily have to be a nihilist for you to create all those change. What is the impact of this rebuttal? The impact of this rebuttal is that all the benefits from opening opposition, for which they need to believe in nihilism, which is that we need discourse, is something which can be achieved on our side with things like liberalism. We don't necessarily need nihilism to achieve those things. But then the next thing they say is that autonomy, right? They need people to have freedom and all those things, right? We think that you can still have freedom on our side. You don't necessarily require nihilism for you to have freedom and question structures within society. The alternative of nihilism is not necessarily dogma. Before I go on, I'll take a PY from opening opposition.
Nihilism allows youth to live by their own values, making them individually happier and more positive influence on society. People still give meaning to life because they have empathy, and young people are in an environment that encourages discourse and discussion and which leads to good values.
Pano, let me give you an alternative to what they are saying, right? A very good example of what they are saying is atheism. Atheism can be the idea that God does not exist, right? There's no such thing as God. But atheism still allows you to have inherent meaning in life. The opposite of nihilism isn't the existence of dogma. Pano, this is very important because these guys are missing out on what the comparative should be, right? So we think that all the things they're talking about freedom and all those things, people can be dogmatic and believe in God and believe in societal. And Pano, this debate is not about just the belief in God. This debate is about the belief of societal values, such as there is respect of women, such as the respect of the law, such as the respect of societal values which we've created, right? It means that you can still have freedom and still believe in all those things. Nihilism is not a precursor for people to be free, but actually nihilism is a precursor to being miserable, because nihilism says that life in itself is inherently like meaningless. Closing government wins this debate because we tell you that their world unravels the very basis of civilization. They do not engage this and show you why that does not exist. Number two, we tell you that our world makes your lives marginally better, even if those narratives are not true. But then thirdly, we give you a reason for you to persevere. Hope is very important for the sustainability of the human race, and we'll die on that hill. Proud to propose.
Thank you very much to the government whip. And now we invite the opposition whip to sum up this debate as a whole. Here.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, give me just a second. Okay, so a large part of this debate, especially from the government side, it comes down to what actually is nihilism. We don't believe that this means that you will not have any values, that you will hate everything or not care about anything. This is their framing does not go to with what we know of human nature. But notice that it's actually focused on your feeling of meaning and what you're taught. Like, notice that nihilism is, like, in simple terms, and this is a simple definition, it's the feeling that there is no higher meaning. You should not expect any higher meaning. You should not expect karma. You should not have anything of the like, and you're randomly put there in the universe. It's a biological randomness. And that's it. That's it for us. What we prove to you and what Georgia analyzes is actually how this leads to individuals having a more fulfilling, more satisfactory, and even a more meaningful life. Ironically, when they for one, they don't expect this ultimate meaning, so they are more resistant to actually evoke disappointments, and also it's better for the people that are worse off in society, for the ones that cannot fulfill these expectations. These expectations are going to have fantastic lives. They're going to have the perfect love, the perfect, everything will make sense. Thirdly, it also helps them not blame themselves, because if you believe in this narrative that life is inherently meaningful and you're finding out that your life is not, first, even if you're not skeptical about the narrative, you will then ask yourself, is this my own fault? What did I do wrong? Why am I suffering? And so on. And if you are skeptical with the narrative, it will probably be, without this affecting young people, in farther down your life, you will suffer a lot more. It will be after your divorce, when you're 50, when you find out that love is not what you expected, and so on. You're not going to be prepared. You're going to suffer. And at that time, there will be a lot more expectations on you, and so on. So more suffering on that point. And we also add you this, we explain to you how this will help you when you figure out this when you're young. It will help you prioritize actually how you spend your time and your money, the resources you do have. Okay, so let's see the responses we get. We get the responses similar to opening government, closing government is very similar. They tell you, oh, nihilists don't have values. Notice that this is not human nature. This is not how we were biologically programmed. You're still programmed to actually feel suffering, and this is very important. And you're still programmed to feel joy. So when you do the things you like, you're still going to feel joy, and so on. You're programmed to care about people, and so on. And notice that still you have external incentives not to behave as a psychopath. You're not going to go around killing people. Even if you don't have any values, you're still going to have society that will punish you if you do that. But notice, why is this suffering important? On either side, what we bring to you here is that when you expect less, when you don't expect an ultimate fulfilling life where your life is perfect, your family life is perfect, and your job is perfect, and it will all make sense, and you will be rewarded by God if you are good or whatever, then when you're faced with reality, you're going to actually get a lot more out of it. When you're faced with a situation where you have a good job but it's not perfect, you're going to know that nothing is perfect in life. You should not expect perfect things, and you're going to get more satisfaction. Taking a realistic definition of nihilism, it puts out to the debate a lot of what CG and OG tells you. Their other point is, oh, people get joy out of heaven and the idea of heaven. Notice that people also get quite a lot of suffering, because for the idea of heaven, you need the idea of hell, which means that you have this massive fear about it. You're afraid if you're doing everything right, you're afraid of eternal suffering, and so on. The best example they could give you also terrifies quite a lot of people. Okay. So we don't believe that this will lead to a societal collapse or whatever. Okay, so let's see what actually like our opening gives us. Like our opening focuses a lot like on the aspect of social change. You're going to change the world and so on, and that will be a lot different. And you're going to have like better discourse, and that will lead. Okay, we focus on the individual, but notice that they make quite a lot of assumptions. First, they assume that when you don't believe in anything, you're going to organically come to conclusions that are aligned with their own views. Notice that that's not entirely the case, because people will not necessarily develop like liberal progressive views like by themselves. Usually, like first, sometimes it's against their own interests. Actually, sometimes they were still influenced by their surrounding. You still have people around you and so on. Like also like it's very like and even if they do, even if you buy them at that these young nihilistic people will now be progressive, note that they still have a lot to do to actually prove any social change, because social change is contingent on a lot of other factors. I'm going to give you like some like the economic situation, what is possible, like the media's effect on people, like lobbying, corruption. And still like you have the fact that first, this is only one segment of young people, even if it's 60 or 70%, it's just one segment, and young people are in one segment of the population. So I don't think like in this debate we can realistically prove social change. Okay, then they tell you you're going to try to change the world. They tell you in their world you're going to try to change the world, fail, and blame yourself. Okay, maybe this is true for some people. I don't know. I don't think most people are like really suffering because they can't change the world. Some people, sure. But what we bring you is actually something that influences like everyday people, like a lot of people. Like if you expect too much, if you expect like a perfectly sensible life and so on, and you don't get it, and you're not going to get it because that's reality we live in, you're going to suffer a lot. Notice that even when you get good things, you're still going to feel that they should be a lot better, and then you're going to doubt your relationship. Thirdly, like also you're still going to face the reality of nihilism, and at one point, and it's a lot better to do it when you're young, when you can change a lot of the things about your life than when 20 years have passed and there are very little things you can change, and you have all these responsibilities, your family life, and so on that are pressing. And thirdly, they tell you you will make better decisions and so on that are more aligned with yourself. Okay, I say yes, this is true, but the reason we believe that that our case is more important is that not only we don't prove that like them that you will make different choices better for you, but we prove to you why the choices you make will actually like lead to less suffering, and not only less suffering and less expectations, but also you will get more satisfaction because you'll be able to enjoy the things you do. You will have like more agency to do these sort of things, and overall you're going to have a more meaningful life. So if we judge this debate on the metric of who brings more satisfaction to people's lives, who proves that this movement that brings a better life, a better existence, and so on, we believe that we take this debate over the other teams because we don't claim any impacts that we cannot prove. We explain to you in simple terms why this will be better in the long run, why it will be better for their lives, why it will be better for their expectations, and overall why people are happier and suffer less. And I think that's a very clear metric to judge this debate. Like, suffer less, enjoy life more. That's how we win.
Thank you very much to the opposition whip and indeed all the speakers in this debate. So we had Cien's point opening government, Haifa